cholesterol pathway. I think we went over the concept of how the body produces cholesterol. And who remembers the importance of this coenzyme Q10? Anyone can actually chime in, whoever's the first one. Just let us know who you are, and then tell me the significance of the CoQ10.
It's needed for ATP production.
Okay, who was that? I didn't
Maggie.
see him. Maggie? So yes, it is needed for ATP production. If we go back and think about, let's see if we can go back here. Let me see this picture here. We'll look at this one this week, I think. So you'll see here in this picture, this yellow structure here, that's the mitochondria of the cell, right? So anything outside of that, here's the cytosol. So when we look at a cell, you're going to have the cell membrane, which is a phospholipid bilayer. There'll be a nucleus in the center, and then a bunch of other organelles. This one is the mitochondria that is producing ATP, but in order to do that, we have glucose here in the blue that needs to be broken down into pyruvate. That step of going from this glucose being a 6-carbon sugar into pyruvate, which is 2 3-carbon sugars. Once that's done and you have pyruvate in the presence of oxygen, that can enter the mitochondria. And that enters into the mitochondria for the second step, which is the Kreb cycle, to produce some energy. It's not producing a lot. You can see it's only producing 2 ATPs, but it is making a lot of coenzymes. The NAD and FAD are these coenzymes. And the coenzymes that are being produced are going to be utilized in the ETC, which is the electron transport chain. That's where all the money is made, right? That's where all the ATP is actually produced. So the CoQ10 that we were talking about is utilized by the mitochondria, not so much in the Krebs cycle, but it really is used predominantly in the electron transport chain. Now, let me just see if I could bring up an image here. Let me... see if I can find a good picture that I'd like. So let's see if I could bring this, zoom in a little bit here. So within the mitochondria, this right here is looks like the phospholipid bilayer of the mitochondria. You can see these like number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and over here would be 5. really 5 different complexes that take place in the electron transport chain. You can see all these hydrogens out here in the outer membrane. You can see NAD and FAD, these coenzymes used here in the matrix. But in order to shuttle and move these electrons from one complex, like complex 1, into complex 2 and 3, you could see where CoQ10 falls into play. It's super, super important. There are other things that are just as important as CoQ10, like iron is extremely important, but CoQ10 is in that beginning stage. So if someone is deficient in CoQ10, there's going to be a very, very difficult time for the electron transport chain to function to produce energy. So where are all these, where are all the mitochondria? Where are all these mitochondria found? Who wants to take a guess? Where are the most mitochondria found? Who wants to chime in on that?
It's like the heart, the brain.
Yeah, why would that be? Let's just talk it out. So why the heart? Why the brain? I know I mentioned this in our last class. So why the heart and why the brain?
Because those are the places that need the most energy.
Because they're working all the time, right? They're working hard. I mean, the heart is constantly pumping, so that muscle needs lots of energy. The brain is always thinking, it's always working, it's always producing neurotransmitters. So your skeletal muscles, the liver that's always detoxifying, the kidneys. So any part of the body that is working has to have mitochondria. And the parts that are working the most are going to have lots of mitochondria, which mean you have these little factories that are producing energy. And in order to make energy, you need the right nutrients, and CoQ10 is one of them. But so is iron. So is iron. Within the electron transport chain, there are these iron sulfur boxes that are very, very, very important. But iron is an important mineral. Now, let me ask you this. What does a person experience symptomatically if they're iron deficient? How does this person feel? First of all, what do we call it if they're iron deficient?
Anemic.
Yeah, they call it anemic. So if someone is anemic, how do they feel? Do they have lots of energy?
Very lethargic.
Yeah, they're lethargic, they're tired, they're fatigued. So now you have an understanding. Women may understand this more than men, because when women go through the men's season, they go through that time of month where they're menstruating and you're losing blood, you're losing iron. You may not have a lot of energy during those days. You may feel a little bit run down, a little bit tired, because you're losing blood. If you're losing blood, you're losing iron. If you're losing iron, then what does the mitochondria have to help produce ATP? Make sense? So we spoke about the importance of CoQ10 for the electron transport chain. And what happens when people are using cholesterol medication is that they're blocking their body's ability to produce cholesterol, but they're also blocking their body's ability to produce CoQ10. And if you don't have CoQ10, then mitochondria don't have they can't produce enough energy. And then the body parts that need the most energy start to dysfunction. And there are a lot of mitochondrial diseases out there. So if I go, let's say I type in here PubMed, and we just type in mitochondrial disease or mitochondrial dysfunction. See if migraines pops up there. So mitochondrial dysfunction and migraines, that's a possibility. Mitochondrial dysfunction and diabetes. Mitochondrial dysfunction and diabetes. How about mitochondrial dysfunction and dementia? Mitochondria and mitochondrial cascades in Alzheimer's disease, right? So all of these things I know because I'm well aware that if you think about neurological function, you think about muscle function, you think about heart function. Let's look at this. Let's look at CoQ10 and heart disease. CoQ10 and heart failure. There you go. Pretty recent paper. So mitochondria is super important. You will learn a whole lot about it, but now you're thinking about it in a different light because in order to do any work, right, in order to do work, the body needs energy. Just think about you as a human. If you're going to study and you have to do work, you need energy. Oh, doc, sorry, I didn't have enough time to study for the test. I just didn't have enough energy. I worked, right? Energy is super important. So fueling the mitochondria properly, the mitochondria need B vitamins. It needs B1, it needs B2, it needs B3, it needs magnesium, it needs iron, it needs CoQ10 for the mitochondria to have the right nutrients, the right ingredients to produce energy so that the body and all its parts can function properly. Otherwise, you get mitochondrial dysfunction. And mitochondrial dysfunction shows up in so many different flavors, from Alzheimer's, dementia, migraines, diabetes, fibromyalgia. There's so many different eye diseases. There's so many different possibilities out there, okay? So that was the importance of the cholesterol pathway, the CoQ10. And now that you're getting into the cell, and you're going to be doing the cell this week, I'd like for you, when I finish with this brief intro, you're going to spend an hour and 23 minutes on the cell. And then there's about 20 minutes left over on mitosis. This is really where a lot takes place. A little bit in here, important, but not as important as what takes place here. There is another video. These videos are from YouTube. They're not done by me, but I think they are helpful to help you understand the material. When we talk about the cell membrane and cholesterol and statin drugs, that was just one component, right? I was just trying to tease you a little bit by show you how if you play around with one ingredient, and here where we're talking about cholesterol, a cell membrane is a phospholipid bilayer that you will learn in this video, but it has carbohydrates and it has proteins and it has fats and it has water. So if there's an imbalance between carbohydrates and proteins, right? We know people that are on low fat diets. We know people that are on high carb diets. We know people on low carb diets. Once you start changing and going to an extreme of eliminating one of those organic compounds, you are affecting the integrity of the cells. And the body can adapt, believe me. Oh, the body can. The body can shift from protein metabolism to carbohydrate metabolism to fat metabolism. But we want to give it all the fuel in a balanced portion. And for each of us, that balanced portion is different. Where some of you may need higher carbohydrates in your diet. Where some of you need very low carb but higher fat. Some need high protein, little fat, mediocre carbs. Each of us is different. And you won't know until you analyze it through function. How is my body functioning? Not just how is it feeling, but how is it functioning? If your body is functioning well, then your biochemistry is probably pretty good in terms of the food and the fuel that you're consuming. But if you're malfunctioning, then you have to look at the ingredients, what's going in, and change those ratios. And I try and keep it simple. For a lot of people I take care of, if someone is on a high protein diet and they're sick, I go low protein, high fat. Let's see how that works. If that doesn't work, then we go high carb, low protein, mediocre fat. But you need them all because the cell membranes have them all. And remember, cells make up tissues, tissues make up organs, organs make up systems, and systems make up the organism. So you want to have a little bit of everything in the system. It's just what I need for my body may be different than you, and what you need may be different than me. And that will change as well through different stages of your life. That changes. It's not stagnant. It's dynamic, right? Dynamic. It is what, right? We say homeostasis is a state of balance, but a dynamic state of change. So when you think of the chemistry that we learned in the last lecture, now we'll be able to apply some of that information to this lecture when you learn about the cells and you learn about the cell membrane. And then you will learn about certain organelles, right? Organelles are just small organs in there, and you'll learn about certain organelles that are involved in metabolizing carbohydrates or producing protein. Well, how neat is that you have certain parts of a cell that can produce protein for itself, or it can produce protein to export outside of the cell. And you'll hear of the word exocytosis when it's producing a protein that it needs to ship outside of the cell. But sometimes the cell itself is so intelligent that it says, oh my God, my cell membrane is damaged and I need to recycle and refresh the cell membrane with more protein. So the cell organelles can produce more protein and recycle itself. And then we need important antioxidants to counteract and quench some of the oxidative stress that the mitochondria are pushing out. And this is where foods that are high in vitamin C, which is an antioxidant, can recycle the water-soluble part of a cell membrane. Most of us know that vitamin C is an antioxidant, but we know it's water-soluble. So it can help to protect the water-containing portion of the cell membrane. But then we know we have other vitamins that are antioxidants that are fat-soluble, like vitamin A and vitamin D and vitamin E and vitamin K and CoQ10. So you have A, D, E, and K, which are fat soluble, that can help to protect the fatty part of the cell membrane. And if you don't put fat in your diet, you can't properly absorb those nutrients either. They're fat soluble. The water soluble ones are the B vitamins and vitamin C. Those are water soluble. The fat soluble are A, D, E, and K. And then CoQ10 isn't a vitamin, it's actually a coenzyme. Okay, so that's what I'd like for you to do today. And if you have any questions after watching that just under 2 hours of information, it's probably going to take you an hour and a half if you speed it up a little bit. If you have questions on any of that content, please reach out, shoot me an email, and I'll be able to assist you. But it's pretty straightforward. If you want to jump ahead after the cells, then you can get into the tissues. And when we talk about tissues, there are those 4 types. There's epithelial, connective, muscle, and nerve. And muscle and nerve is fairly easy and very quick when we go through it. It's the epithelial tissue and muscle and connective tissue that take a little bit longer. So I would break that up into 2 different lectures, and I have. So epithelial I discuss by itself in this video. And then here, since muscle and nerve is fairly quick, I probably teach it in less than 10 minutes. Then we have connective tissue. That's what the CT is here. Connective tissue. I put together in the second part. That's an hour and 10 minutes. Okay. If you want to get ahead, jump on this. It gets very, very interesting here because we start to connect a little bit of tissues into something called intestinal permeability, which I'll get into a little bit more next week. If any of you jump ahead and get into tissues, I'd be more than happy to address some of this earlier than next week, but I'll save it for next week, okay? Okay, let me stop this recording and